Here we are. We made it.
Yeah, not sure what happened there.
Hey,
I had to get a link and then it made me log in like three times.
this is post COVID
No,
webinaring.
right?
Hi
We should be better.
everybody.
We should be better at this.
We should be. Hi everybody. We are getting folks logged in at the moment, so we'll let everybody's Zooms update before we hop in and get started. We'll also let Kevin breathe for a moment since we were photo finish getting in here. We love technology here. You've got power today, so you're good.
Yep.
You, how's
That's a
the
positive stuff.
how's the campus going
Well,
post
we got Wi-Fi,
hurricane?
we got water, we got sewers, we got lights, so everything's good so far.
Yeah, yeah. For our listening and viewing audience, Lees-McCrae College is in Banner Elk, North Carolina, impacted by the recent hurricanes. I think you got on campus for the first day in like a month. What, Monday, Tuesday?
Yeah, since I was in NACAC, yeah, Monday. Yep.
Yeah, it's insane. It's
We
tough.
had
And
we had no roads and trees down, roads washed out. It was nuts. Never saw anything like it in my life.
yeesh, yeesh. Well, I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're here. And we will. It is now officially 3 after the hour, so we will get started with our amazing conversation today. I've been told to say the word amazing too much, so I'm going to try to not say amazing over and over and over again. But this conversation, it's really set up to be a fireside chat focused on student engagement 101, a forward thinking fireside chat. My name is Gil Rogers. I am the founder and principal of GR7 Marketing. I work with edtech startups and business leaders in the higher education space on new product innovations, on developing of great ideas, and kind of moving those things forward. And Concept 3D has been an amazing partner for about a year now. Oh, the camera's starting to go crazy, Kevin.
See that? I see that. Not sure
That
why.
happened on Monday too.
It
Hopefully,
did.
you'll get that fixed while I'm doing our quick intros.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll go into podcast mode. But I've been working with Concept 3D for a little over a year now on a platform called Flipped App, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Really centered on that idea of direct to student engagement. And I think, given advancements in technology and given advancements in student preferences and changes in student preferences, I know Kevin and I have had many conversations about the direction that things are going. But this conversation today is really meant and centered on helping us to kind of start a dialogue around how institutions and institutional leaders should be really thinking about making those types of changes. And so obviously there are platforms and products that can do that, but there's also mindset shifts and thought process shifts that become part of that. So before we hop in, Kevin and I met earlier this week because we knew that if we just hopped in and started talking, we'd go in 1,000 different directions. So we have a loose outline of things we want to talk to. But before we hop into some of those items, Kevin, I would love for you to give a quick introduction of yourself, and a little bit of your superhero origin story. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Phillips. Currently, I'm the Senior Vice President for Enrollment Management at Lees-McCrae College in Banner Elk, North Carolina. I'm starting my sixth year here, but my 32nd year overall. So, shockingly, it's been that long. I started working in admissions at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut, which is where I went to school and played basketball. And the quick intro of how I got involved was I was going to set out on a path to be a college basketball coach. So I was the grad assistant for my head coach, and the gentleman who was the VP for enrollment was also supervising athletics. And for a year, watched me interacting with people. And where Gil alluded to it, I'll just keep talking all day long. So he said, "Hey, you'd probably be pretty good in admissions." And so I took that job, and for a couple of years, I did both basketball and admissions work. And somewhere around 1999, I went to the University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut, and that's where I met Gil. We worked together for a few years. I think it was 5 years, Gil, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a pretty, at least
Sounds about
four
right.
anyway. Yeah. And then I stayed there until 2019. I spent a lot of time there, and I went through the ranks from an admissions counselor all the way to the director of admissions and an AVP. And then I took this position just simply because Lees-McCrae is a great school that a lot of people don't know about. Needed some help. And so a lot of the things that Gil and I had worked on at the University of New Haven, which helped the University of New Haven become the institution that it is today, just by imparting some of those basic principles, we've done really well here. We survived COVID. We've survived FAFSA debacles, but the hurricane was a tough one. Didn't expect to have a hurricane in the mountains of Western North Carolina, but it was pretty bad. But we're coming out of it now, and we just started, in-person classes again. But ironically, despite the fact that I thought I was done with basketball coaching, because I did it for 16 years, I'm actually an assistant coach for our men's basketball team here at the college. The head coach was bothering me for 2 full years. The president agreed to allow me to do it. I get paid $2,500 to be an assistant basketball coach, but I think it does help me overall. And the oddest thing about it is, as the senior VP athletics reports to me, so the director of athletics reports to me. So in basketball, I'm probably my boss's boss's boss, but that's the summary of how I got here. And ever since Gil left the University of New Haven, I've worked with him in a lot of different capacities over the years. He and I have always been forward thinking and innovative and trying to be helpful to not only institutions that we were at, but to others as well.
Awesome. And I will say, one awesome full circle thing. I just said awesome again. Amazing full circle thing. You started out as a basketball coach that became an admissions counselor. And now you're an enrollment leader that is a basketball coach, right? So you're nice little Oreo cookie of life with a lot of cream in the middle. I will say, before we hop into the agenda today, first, folks, this conversation is being recorded. So if you want to download it later, listen to it as a podcast type form, feel free. We're going to talk about a lot of random things. We did also make promises that we would tell some stories about how I got Kevin mad at me a few times, which we'll get into those a little bit as well. But I will say, before we revisit stories about Kevin being mad at me, I will return the praise of, I'm not here in this chair talking about these types of things if Kevin isn't a boss that empowered and allowed me to try things, fail at things, and keep doing new and innovative things throughout my career. And I think that's the lesson one. I think we want to make sure that folks kind of impart, if you are in a leadership position, encouraging innovation is a huge part of helping your staff develop and helping them grow. And so I do like to say that innovation oftentimes is accelerated by urgency, right? And you mentioned that every year there's an asterisk, right? When it comes to enrollment cycles, it's the FAFSA fiasco, it's a hurricane, it's COVID, it's this. There's always something, right? You want to look at year over year reports on where you were with applications and where you are with deposits each year. But the reality is that there's always some reason why. I remember one year we were looking at our year over year report. Like, why did we get 35 deposits this day last year? We got none none last year, 32 this year. Oh, last year it was a Sunday and the office was closed and nobody was opening the envelopes, right? And so there's always some sort of crazy thing to look at. But I want to talk about you mentioned the origin story of when we were together at the University of New Haven, right? One of the things that I remember is when I started in that role, I want to say it was my second week, there was a shakeup in the office. You were promoted into the director of admission position. I think you were an associate director at that point, or senior associate, whatever it was. And we had a directive, right? And the directive was, we need to recruit a crap load of people between early June and the end of the summer. Otherwise, there's going to be massive cuts at the institution. We were in a challenging position. I'd love for you to kind of share that experience of kind of being hoisted into that situation. And then we can talk about the outcomes and what we did.
Yeah, sure. No, that's an interesting story for everybody that's listening today. Obviously I was still coaching at the time. I was a high school head coach. And as Gil mentioned, I was the associate director and also running our campus events like the open houses. And honestly, I loved the job. I was doing great. And the VP at the time called me into his office and said he made a change and you're the director of admissions now. I didn't apply for it and he didn't even give me a choice. And then I thought about it. I said, well, let's get to work on this. And he surprised me because I knew we were running a little bit behind that year. Everybody who's been in enrollment It doesn't matter. Presidents, vice presidents, everybody's always looking for numbers. Even at state schools, community colleges, everybody's always looking. And we were behind. And the gentleman who was the VP at the time basically said, I know this isn't your fault, but we need about 200 more students by September. And as Gil mentioned, this was early June. So that's probably the craziest directive that I ever got. And I said, "Oh, piece of cake. Let's get to work on that." I don't know if you want me to keep talking about what we did, Gil, or
No, I think, yeah. So I would love to at that moment kind of think about, you were put in that role for a reason, right? And I think a big part of this is for the folks who are listening, is kind of learning that lesson of I'll have you be retrospective for a moment. Why do you think he chose you to be in that moment, in that time?
Yeah, even though I wasn't thinking about it, obviously the VP was, and he was watching me just like the VP at Sacred Heart had watched me. People who know me, I mean, I'm a talker, but I'm not a self-promoter, so I'm not like networking very much. I like to do my job, and I like to try to do it the very best that I can. And I think sometimes that's a way you can get somewhere. If you work hard and you have some successful results and surround yourself with a good team. Gil was part of that team. We had just literally hired him, but we had a lot of work to do, and I think that the VP had been watching how I was working with students because I also supervised the student tour guides at the time. We also ran the events, and I always believed in. I never used the word customer service. I call quality service because you could debate all day long that the student is a customer. Faculty may not agree with that, but you want to provide some type of quality service. And so when people are investing money and time into college, it's a huge purchase. I think a lot of people that get into enrollment never really think about that. And so I was fortunate that I had some good mentors. The Jim Barcanero was the Sacred Heart VP. Dennis Nostrand was the University of New Haven VP who elevated me, but there was a couple people in between. And I think I didn't realize it at the time. I always have my own ideas, but you always have people that help develop you. Coach Dave Bike was my college basketball coach. And while he never worked in enrollment, he worked 35 years at Sacred Heart University, and he was a great boss. And so, like, thinking about how he allowed me to do a lot of things that made me a better basketball coach, I tried to do the same things with admissions. I think I'm better at it today than when Gil and I were working together because I think as time goes along, you see what works, what doesn't work, who's good, who's not. But the short answer to the question is, or the long answer, I should say, is honestly working hard and caring about what you do. And I always say attention to detail. You can't focus on something if you're not detailed. You have to be aware of everything too, and you got to buy into what you're doing and try to do the very best you can.
Yeah, and you mentioned they were being detailed. We're not going to tell the story about how I sent a mass email with a bunch of typos in it to everybody. We'll ignore that one. That's not the story about being mad at me.
No, it wasn't, but I think one of them said, "Come to our open hose." It left
Yep,
out to you.
come to our open hose and a picture of spraying people with water. No, we'll get into better ones. So, long story short, we did hit the class by the skin of our teeth, but we did, and a lot of that had to do with, this is old school enrollment, just picking up the phone the next morning, the day after a student inquires, kind of putting like a for-profit education hat look on how we handled these things. Transfer student outreach, international outreach, like we were able to shore up the class. Then year two, this is where the fun happened. And I created a checklist. I'm going to read these things off to you, Kevin, and see what your reactions are for everybody. But we did a lot of stuff. I'm going to use that S word today, not the word we used yesterday. We did a lot of stuff, and we transitioned to CRM platform over a 3-day period. We'll talk about that briefly. We got on literally every social media platform known to man. We signed up with a bunch of lead gen services and websites. Zinch was one of them, College Week Live, virtual events, campus tours. We established our own private social network called My UNH Space. We started a podcast called The Kevin Phillips Show. We hosted virtual events and did webinars, and this was pre-COVID. We did projects that included video on our website we implemented a new virtual tour. I will say at the time, Concept 3D didn't exist. So we worked with someone else. If it had, we would have used Concept 3D, I'm sure. But that's a laundry list, right? And so let's talk about the why behind all of those at that point in time of why did we do all of that stuff?
Yeah, no, that was a lot of stuff. And it's for everybody's benefit, we're talking the 2008, 2009 timeframe. So we're talking 15, 16 years ago. We wanted to be better at what we were doing because at the time, University of New Haven was not that well known of a commodity. And, today I use the word strategic more than I did then, but basically we weren't doing a lot of things to attract students other than buying a whole bunch of names and send them a bunch of marketing pieces and hoping they would reply. So we wanted to, the new version or the new way of saying this is meet them where they're at. So we wanted to meet students where they were starting to get at because, as Gil just mentioned, I mean, social media wasn't really a thing that colleges were using back in that time frame. And he and I presented at some conferences, and even after he left, I did a couple with another gentleman. And I would run into a lot of colleges that would either say, "I can't believe you're doing that," in a negative way. "That's not going to work. What are you wasting our time for?" And other people said, "Wow, I wish our boss would let us do that because I think that's the next best thing." And so what we were trying to do was saying, how can we reach as many students as we can? And we weren't necessarily at the time thinking about, being shaping the class or anything. We just needed more students for the revenue.
Right.
And thinking back to what Gil just mentioned, we did hit that class, which means we got, I believe the number was like 209 additional students that had not paid an enrollment deposit from early June until Labor Day weekend of that summer. Now that took a lot of work. And so when you start thinking about it, that's the old school way. Pick up a phone, send them an email. To some extent, you still have to do that, especially if you're a small private college. But there's so many other ways. There were people starting to be what was known as the stealth applicant at the time. That means they never became an inquiry and they didn't want to get anything from you. So you had to find ways to engage them. And so that's why that social media, we started it was funny, the Kevin Phillips show. Gil was the host and we just kind of did what we're doing today. We just started talking about a lot of different things and people started listening in. And so, the podcasts are much more popular today than people weren't really doing them in 2008 timeframe. So I think we just because we needed to get more students, we just tried to do a lot of different things, probably too many things, but we did them and many of them worked.
Yeah. And I think the too many things comes from, to your point about working hard. At the time, the mindset was we just got to do everything to be everywhere and do all things for all people because we need to be, it's like the old Wayne Gretzky adage, right? I don't pass the puck to where someone is, I pass it to where they're going to be, right? And so some of these things we were doing because they were new and there weren't people on them yet and they weren't doing anything yet. But what if they did? What if they were there? We wanted to already be there and having that experience and having be the people that invited them to the party, not the ones that are chasing them there. Like we get in trouble for so many times when it comes to like social media. Kids are on a different social media platform. Why? Because they're running from their parents, they're running from the brands. And so we're chasing them there. What happens if we're actually there when they get there saying hello, right? Like there's an opportunity there to be on the forefront and be one of the first institutions doing something, not someone who's doing something 10 years later when it's no longer viable, but now the big consulting firm is saying do it that way, right? I think that gets us to the point then of this is the first. I don't think I got you mad at this one, but this was when I quit, right? It was after like 2 years. I was like, all right, I'm out. I'm going back to my old school. I want to go work there. Took some bad advice from a supervisor, and I was super passive aggressive about it. Wrote a letter, printed it out, put it in the VP's mailbox, and then drove to New Jersey to go to a college fair. And I think I didn't even make it to the make it to the New York border before Kevin calls me and is like, "Wait a minute, hold on," right? And I think that that obviously was a transformative point in my career because I could have gone back to where I was quote unquote comfortable, right? Go back to my alma mater, do work there. Great school, love it, but sometimes you got to go out and grow and do something new, right? And so I this goes back to the why element. And just kind of want to circle back to, because I know there's elements of your own personal experiences with this. What kind of drove you to make that call, but also what did you do afterwards that maybe has helped from a kind of a leadership and a management perspective, so you don't have passive aggressive people dropping letters in mailboxes and driving away as fast as they can.
Yeah, no, that's a great story too, because, I was obviously in my first director's position, and, I look at it as a leadership position, but at the time we were just scrambling around doing all sorts of stuff. And now, all these years later, I know I myself always looked at opportunities, and it's always weird or odd to talk to your boss or your boss's boss, because Gil was reporting to another gentleman who reported to me at the time. And that gentleman was going to just, I don't know if he got mad at Gil, or he was just like, he quit, screw him. And he was like taking the letter in. And I said, wait a minute, what happened? What's going on? And all these years later, I try to have this open dialogue, and I'll jump ahead for 1 second, then I'll go back. Um, my staff doesn't always stay, but we've had a higher retention rate over the years just because of things I'm going to talk about now. People will stay if they feel valued. People will stay if they are included, and I ultimately ended up with a career progression plan, and it came out of this, because my first reaction was, wait a minute, I like Gil. Gil's good. I don't want him to leave. Why is he leaving? So I called him. I said, what are you doing? Do you really want to leave? Or is there an opportunity to talk about this? And clearly there was an opportunity to talk about this, and he didn't know that he could do that. I hadn't expected him to just quit. So we had a conversation and we worked that out. So he came back, and believe there was a pay raise in there too. So, at the end of the day, I think what happened from there is, we started to really, hone down on all of the different things. We put Gil into a leadership role where he was supervising people. And so my idea was, wait a minute, and you'll see it today. If anybody's in admissions, you read an article a day about, oh, nobody wants to work and nobody feels valued. I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of good young people. I've got some great young people on my staff right now. I met 2 or 3. After NACAC, I had to pitch in old school. I did about 20 college fairs because I couldn't come home. So I did some college fairs, and it was a great experience. I felt like an admissions counselor again, which was great because you got to meet people. But I also saw the difference. There's some excellent young people in the field, and there are some that just simply don't want to be there. I think that was the same in 2008 and 9. And so what is the goal of the employee? Find out what they want to do. Some people take an admissions job to get a paycheck. That's what I did. He said, you'll be good at this. So I need more money than the basketball coaching position. So I think when you're younger and you're moving through the ranks of somewhere and you're not sure exactly where you want to be, you sometimes make decisions that are not the best decisions. I've done it. I quit and went back to New Haven. That was something that, so I already had done that myself. So when I saw Gil doing it too, because he and I are pretty similar in the way we think, I just felt like I could have just ignored it and said, oh, well, see you later. And then we wouldn't even be on this call probably if we had done that today. Because, he was given leadership opportunities. I retained an excellent employee. We got some great classes, and we really started making the University of New Haven go in the right way, obviously with the help of other people. But it led me to put in a career progression plan, which I use today here at Lees-McCrae. It involves promoting people based on their performance evaluation, and not just to promote them. You can say, hey, this is an admissions counselor. Let's make them the assistant director. People do this all the time. Then they start making up titles, so senior assistant director. And we did that too. But what I do today is there is additional increased responsibilities. At some point, there's supervisory responsibilities. There are project tasks that we assign, and they can range from being an athletics liaison to being the honors program liaison to running the student tour guides to running the campus events, whatever it may be. And that comes with a pay raise too. And so we don't just give it, you got to earn it. And then we talk about this. And I think that makes people feel valued. They feel like they're part of the team. They feel like they're contributing to the team. And the biggest thing is you got to communicate with them. If I just did it and just sat in my office all day and didn't explain things to people, I've got a great director of admissions here now who was basically doing the same thing I was doing. He was coaching basketball and teaching. And I said, hey, you might be good in admissions. And he became the director after just 1 year because he has the leadership skills and the people skills. And that's a long answer again, because as you can see, I'll talk, but I think it's valuable for people to hear that. Everybody has their own thing, But like if you're in a leadership role and you have the capability of adding something like a career progression plan, you can retain good employees because guess what? A good employee is eventually going to go somewhere else because they're good. Somebody's going to take them, somebody's going to give them more money, and maybe they just want to go and grow. And at some point that happens, right? You have to let them
Yep.
go. Um,
Yep.
my daughters have graduated from college and they've got jobs and things, and they're adults now, and you can't just keep treating them like kids. So the best, like when I see Gil, I feel like I had something to do with his success because of all the times we worked together and the things that I allowed him to do. And so I value the people. I think that's important.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and you're right. And I think one of the things to think about, and you mentioned about listening and talking to the people. This is the fun, like I should have gotten fired probably story is maybe not fired, but written up probably. But there was a time when I was supervising the admissions counselors, and so we were having phone call nights and getting our work done. And Kevin's a social guy. If you can't tell, he likes to talk and have conversations. And I'm in my office and I'm doing some of my work and reports and all that sort of thing. And he's in the cubicle area of the office talking to one of the members of the staff, probably for like 20 minutes. To be fair, I had a reason to get a little frustrated.
Yeah, it wasn't 2 minutes for sure.
Yeah, but rather than go out and just be like, hey, we got like course correct things and check in on progress. No, I picked up my phone in my office, literally within eyesight of everything going on. Like I called to a desk probably 15 feet away to the person he was speaking with, and basically said to her like, hey, I know he's like your boss's boss, but you need to tell Kevin to like cut it out and leave you alone so you can get your work done. And she looked at me like with like eyes of deer to headlights kind of thing. And we hung up. I don't know what she exactly said, but then Kevin came into my office and we had a nice long conversation ourselves, because that was kind of a rude way for me to handle that situation, the passive aggressive like method of that. But at the end of the day, after our probably 45-minute conversation, we came to an understanding, shook hands, hugged it out, whatever you want to call it. I did not get fired, clearly. And I think one of the lessons from that, and I'd love your take on it too, is that I reflecting on that now, where I came from in that situation was I had a team with goals and priorities, and I know not everybody on the team wants to put in extra hours. They don't want to stay long, and especially now in where we are today, and we're getting to like the work smarter, not harder element of all of this. But at the time, it was like you got to get this done. So if you don't get it done, we have to stay longer, right? That sort of stuff. And so I was trying to avoid that type of an issue and get those things done. Could have handled it better, right? Your side of it, what was your kind of thought process there, aside from what you just mentioned before about you like communicating with the staff and being involved in those conversations and knowing what's going on?
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. Now, and knowing now, what I should have known then, I probably could have explained this to Gil and other people. I actually liked it when I was at Sacred Heart University, when the vice president and the director would just talk to you. Because, ultimately, if you just feel like you're punching a clock and you're like an indentured servant that, hey, go get your numbers, we don't care about you. I just felt like having some type of a conversation with people. And a lot of times it was about work related things. As Gil we could tell a story about everything and everybody we work with. We should write a book because there's good stuff in there. Now, today, I try not to tell as many stories for the very reason that Gil is saying it. So Gil wasn't wrong because he was tasked with supervising staff that maybe were not in the same mindset that he and I were in. And so we wanted them to make phone calls and contact their prospects and their applicants. And, this was even before you could text people. But so we really
Well
had to
before
call them. And
that.
so, yeah, it's crazy. So if you're newer to this field, I mean, you couldn't do it. There was a time where we had Blackberries and trying to text on that thing. My hands I couldn't even use the thing to text. So, I think technology's changed for the better, but the premise behind it, you're still contacting a student. So Gil was tasked with, supervising people. And, I was talking to her for too long, the employee. I was just telling her some stories because I felt that I learned a lot about the field when Jim Barcanero at Sacred Heart would tell me stories about what was going on and those things. And so I probably stayed out there too long. So he wasn't wrong. But what Gil probably shouldn't, he already knows now. Um, I just told him when I went in there, I said, look, I am the director of admissions and I am entitled to talk to people from time to time. And I probably should have told him that I was doing it. So I think we both learned a little bit on how to handle things. And it is kind of funny now. I don't think it was funny in the moment because
No.
I want to say maybe 2009, Gil, somewhere around there. I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
it was. But you know, the key component of what we just talked about was we spoke about it and we kind of figured out where we were supposed to be. Like so he wasn't wrong by trying to get his employee to get the work done because that employee, I thought that employee was pretty good actually, but there were others that might not have put that effort in. So if I'm talking to someone for 20 minutes and then they're still going to leave when they were supposed to leave, Gil came up with a great little tagline: presence doesn't equal value. So you could have an employee that's just sitting there. I mean, I could be doing this. I got my notebook out. I'm sitting here. My president comes in, he's going to, oh, look at Kevin's doing the work. So you can masquerade that sometimes, but good employees will get that work done and good managers will find a way to motivate them to get that work done. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I did throw in the chat for everyone. Raise your hand if you've ever used a BlackBerry, and we have three. So there's three so far of people who have used
Yeah,
BlackBerry.
I find it sometimes when I start talking about things, I've got some staff members that are in their 20s and, you know, historically, I mean, I was using floppy disks at Sacred Heart and everybody
Mhm.
was saying, "Oh, you're a high-tech wizard. You got to keep a paper copy." So, we're going way back. I mean, the first year I worked at Sacred Heart, they didn't even have an email. The email was put in and it was very confusing to people. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is never going to work. This is silly." And that's kind of how my mindset always is. How do you know if it's not going to work if you don't try it and you don't try to do it to your very best of your ability? And that's where even that story that we just told, we wanted to mentor that employee so she would be the very best version of herself and have fun while you're doing it. Because calls and texts today, maybe social media DMs, whatever they are, they shouldn't be punishments. They should be fun. And if they're not fun, you got to get another line of work.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll fast forward to then a couple years later. I walked into your office and I sat down and I said, I need to have a conversation. And I need to preface this with, this is not an April Fool's joke. And the statement was, I'm quitting again. and this time it was, for a level of a position that the institution was not going to be able to provide, working at a tech company, staying in higher ed. And so I left, right? And so we separated at that point, but like as you mentioned towards the beginning, have always worked together on projects and things at the various places that I've been helping and supporting. One of the things I wanted to have you share, and in the context of evolving over time and the working smarter, not harder element, is would love to hear you tell a little bit about your approach now at Lees-McCrae versus years ago when it comes to those sorts of things, the doing more with less, the focusing on the right students, the making the most of your staff's time and respecting their time, because you only have so much time in a day, right? And so I'd love for you to kind of give a little bit of what has evolved now that you've been at Lees-McCrae for long enough to graduate and be gone now too. So that you've been able to put into the work there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Honestly, one of the biggest differences here is I'm the senior vice president, so I don't really have to run it by anybody. If it involves extra money that's not in the budget, I talk to the president. So a lot of times I was implementing the tasks that were being assigned to me because I had no choice. And I think I learned a lot. Gil and I were involved in a lot of projects, but ultimately, I believe that you can do too many things, and you know, less is more to me. I also have a much smaller budget here at Lees-McCrae, so I've got to be very conscious of what I spend. And so sometimes, you know, we will work with vendors, but some vendors, and if you are a vendor, this is not an insult to any of you, but some people come at me like I'm Duke. And they think I have the same exact needs that Duke does, and I have the same budget. And we're a completely different institution. We're a small private school of 1,000 students. We're actually full. We have our largest class. Gil and I talked about this just the other day. Some people just judge success about how many applications you have or how many inquiries you get at a college fair. That doesn't matter to me. I want the right inquiry, especially where I am now. because we could go to a fair and pick up 40 inquiries of a student that may never, ever, ever come to Lees-McCrae or apply to Lees-McCrae. And then you're going to waste your time. You're going to waste your resources. So identifying, who are you going to put your time into? So this is just a suggestion. We didn't do this at New Haven because we were just about volume, but here at Lees-McCrae, we ask our counselors who are doing college fairs to give a rating to the inquiry. A 1 is the best one. And 2 is one that, hey, maybe if we work with them, they'll come. And 3, they just scan the app at the college fair. We don't have to call the 3, and we probably don't have to call the 2. But following up with the 1 and developing a relationship with them works. Some state schools down here in North Carolina adopt that approach. I heard someone just the other day say, "Oh, the state school doesn't have to do that." Sure, they do. There's going to be a shortage of students. You've got to find out what's unique about your institution, but you can't substitute personalization. If you can't do it, you can't do it. But if we tried to do what we did at the University of New Haven here, it would backfire and it would fail because we wouldn't develop the relationships. We're not as well known of a school. Lees-McCrae is not, let's face facts, everybody. The average person on the street doesn't wake up saying they're going to go there. But once you find out, we have wildlife biology and wildlife rehabilitation and some unique programs, cycling studies, ski industry business, and regular stuff. You may end up liking it, but there's no reason to buy tons of names. New Haven, we learned from some bosses, we just bought every name that was available to buy. And, you're wasting money because there was definitely a lot of mailing of view books. We were making people call people. And here at Lees-McCrae, if someone says, hey, I'm interested in engineering and I want a big school and I want to be near the ocean, we're not helping them. We don't have engineering. We're in the mountains in North Carolina and we're a small school. So, those likelihood, I think using the data is a great thing. Sometimes you got to trust the gut instinct of an experienced administrator, and you got to communicate and you got to teach. And I think people got to be open-minded. I think Gil and I always were. I think he would say I am. Sometimes he came to me with ideas and companies that I didn't even know about at the time. And, I didn't always say yes, but I said yes almost all the time because he would come with a proposal. I'm good at that now. If I want something, our president here at Lees-McCrae is great at return on investment. If I say I want another employee just because, that's not going to work, but what are we going to get out of it? And so working with the staff is really, really important too. Basically, I'm saying you can't be all things to all people. You don't want to burn out your staff. When we do work weekends here, which is very, I have 2 people working for me that worked at the University of Haven. So clearly they liked working with me. And one of them who we hired in 2021, he was asking, are we going to work every weekend? I said, no. And he goes, well, how many accepted student days do we have? I said, we have 1. And he goes, really? Because we had 8 at the University of New Haven. So we've gotten very good at being focused, being strategic, and being disciplined. And at the same time, we're not burning out employees. Like we're open all summer, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We do information sessions each day, but the employee only has to work 1 Friday, Saturday, or Sunday from May to September. So we rotate. I do 1, everybody else does 1, and that means they're off every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday except 1 throughout the summer. When I approached the team about that, they were like, yeah, we'll do that. So they're excited when they're there. We're getting visitors all summer long. We have student workers that are there, and everybody enjoys having the 3-day weekends. So I think back then we just worked every day, Gil. Correct me if I'm wrong. We were just working. So
every day.
That work-life balance thing that people talk about, I totally believe in that. We just weren't doing it then, but we do it now. And we're very good at what we do.
And I think that's the evolution of the mindset over time, right? Is like the less is more, learning what doesn't work and what does work, and having, I said the other day that our batting average is pretty solid, right? As far as the things to try that work, but then it's also having having the humility to say, hey, this idea was really good 5 years ago and it worked 5 years ago, but it's not working anymore, and moving away from those things. And it's not because it was a bad idea. It was a great idea 5 years ago, but now student preferences have evolved, needs have changed, et cetera. Right. And so I think that's one of the things that's important. I had a call with a person at another school a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I have a net tuition revenue goal. The headcount goal is really a vanity metric, right? That we use for other things. And we've encountered that in the past where more applications, we can use that to demonstrate to the bank that there's more interest in the institution, so we can use that to borrow money to buy to build a residence hall, right? Like these are things outside of the even just what the admissions counselor would need to think about and worry about. I want to take a left turn a little bit, and it's partially because I've got a dog that's getting ready to bark at stuff outside, which is a good segue to your story about authenticity and dogs.
Yeah.
When we're talking about student engagement and really what has changed and what has evolved, especially over the past 5-10 years of this, I'd love for you to kind of share your COVID story, and then two, we can talk about some of the things that you're doing now that are starting and seeing some outcomes of now with regard to new methods for reaching students.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing a little bit just because I told Gil about this story maybe a couple of years ago for the first time. I hadn't talked to him right after the pandemic, but basically what I believe, students want authenticity, and the less we can do the cookie cutter 101 stuff, whether that's in marketing or admissions, the more you're going to stand out. If everybody's doing the same thing, you just become a mass of thousands and the student gets confused and annoyed. And so what the story is, and inadvertently, I'll just get to the point after I tell you the story. So in the spring of 2020, clearly, we didn't know the COVID pandemic was going to do what it did. We had our accepted student day, because there was just one planned for the second week in April. And obviously, we did not shut down till April 4th, but we had to shut down and we were closed for 1 month. We reopened that summer, and I could tell you that story another day, probably, because that's another good one about how to stay open in a pandemic. But we had to pivot and do something. We said, well, we're not going to allow visitor on campus. We've got to do something virtually, which is ironic that Gil and I were doing virtual things in 2008, 9, and 10. So it should have been easier than this, but because it was we had like a week to try to pivot. So I got a friend of mine that was using a platform. I should have just used Zoom, to be honest, but we were like in freak out mode. What are we going to do? And the platform looked great because it functioned as a microsite, and there were videos and links and things and a welcome and stuff like that. But ultimately, there was a connectivity issue because people didn't realize if someone basically people started the webinar and that would stop the person that was hosting it from doing it. Nobody knew that at the time. You couldn't do those things without giving them permission. So we were getting glitches. I don't know if there were too many people on the webinar, because the crazy part, we had over 140 students participating because they had nothing else to do. So we hadn't really thought that through. Anyway, long story short, I was actually up in Connecticut, where I'm originally from, and I guess they're my ex-dogs. They were with my ex-wife at the time, and I said, hey, can you please keep the dogs outside while I'm doing this open house? And she said, okay, but I guess that didn't happen. And at one point, I was in the living room, but the camera, it would be like if I was way back here, and we were out, and then my director was texting me, hey, you're back on. And I would come up to the camera like this, apparently we're back on live. And then the dogs came in and they were barking, and they were in a position where everybody could see them. They were running around, jumping in the air. I had 3 of them, and it became this like chaotic scene. And I kept coming in. Obviously, if you're interested in our pre-veterinary medicine program, this is what you'll be dealing with. So I was just kind of going off the cuff, but internally I was upset. I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster. The craziest part, it wasn't a disaster. The students on the call, lots of them deposited, including someone who's currently working for me as an admissions counselor. She graduated in 3 years. She said it was such a relief to just see someone that wasn't being stressed out. And we clearly were just going with the flow, but I was still providing information. So I don't want to say she was entertained, but she was engaged. And if we were just lecturing, kind of like even when I'm telling the story, hey, Lees-McCrae College has 1,000 students and we have 24 made, like no one cares about that. They want to know what are we getting out of it? And so that's what I mean by authentic content. So in the future, we realize, wow, people were really impressed with that. So we don't want to do that intentionally, but if we have a cycling studies minor here and we want to showcase it, having somebody out on our mountain bike trails, it's a professional mountain bike course, the cycling coach talking about it, or having a student talk about his or her experiences, I think that that's authentic. You're in your environment, you're in your realm. And if you have unique facilities, we have a preserve and a field station for our field biology program, someone that's looking at salamanders or something like that, that's going to be of interest to that particular student. So we kind of learn that you don't want to just have a rehearsed speech all the time. But you can,
Mhm.
there's certain things you have to tell people, but if you can give examples and you can be authentic and you can showcase unique things in a
Yep.
unique way, but that off the cuff stuff, people gave such great feedback and they were understanding of it because we were pivoting. So I think they had a little more tolerance for it, but I didn't know what else to do except go off the cuff. And I'm saying, clearly we're having technical difficulties, folks. Please bear with us. And I was doing it like that. And I guess it just kept people engaged and understanding that we were trying to do the best we could.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of it too, is focusing on those authentic interactions, even when they're by accident. That's what makes it human, right? And I think for years and years and years, we've been so obsessed with the vanity metrics and so obsessed with perfection as institutions that humanity reigns on this sort of thing, right? And we're human. Prospective students are people, admissions counselors are people, and we need to be able to accept that, right? And so I want to talk briefly about, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the things that I'm working with at Concept 3D is a new platform called Flipped App, right? And Flipped App is what it sounds like. It's a flipped application where students are applied to by the colleges and not the other way around, right? And the whole idea behind this is that it creates an environment where the student is only being reached out to by schools that are actually a good fit, and institutions are only being connected to students who are actually applicant ready and should be about, like, as you mentioned, you don't want to get a million applications. You want to get the right applications for your class. Ideally, ideally the funnel isn't a funnel, it's just a pipe, right? And the pipe is everything just goes right through. We know that's not the case. However, the more we can make it behave that way, the better it would be, right? And so I know your team has already started using this platform, and getting and as part of this application cycle, on top of other things in the state and those sorts of things that are happening with respect to direct admission and others. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the early goings with the Flipped App experience and what your learnings have been so far.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate that. I'm always open-minded, and obviously everybody's going full force into this direct admission world, and that'll be a topic for another day. But the way that the Flipped app, the way that they sold it to me made a lot of sense to me. I think that there's a profile for the student that the student creates with their interests, and they basically can indicate, hey, I'm interested in schools in North Carolina, or I'm interested in these academic programs. But it's the personal interest that we found has been very helpful to us, and I've already done some testing with this, myself included, and some of my staff, because we're just getting going with this. But I love the concept 3D concept is great. But basically, the first few people we reach, because you can do outreach messages to the student in the platform. We've tried a couple different things because, like Gil mentioned, I like to try stuff just to see what type of reaction we get or response. And, if you're going to do the cookie cutter one that's a little bit lengthy, that's not going to work. And we tried it just to see, hey, you might be interested in Lees-McCrae. We're a small private school of 1,000 students in the mountains of North Carolina, blah, 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 blah. Let us know if you have any questions, kind of thing, reply back. We got zero replies to those, and I kind of figured we would, so I stopped it, and we went a little bit different approach. We were looking, you can filter to the interest, to the state, to the GPA, so it's really all set up. And it's just, like I said, it's just getting going. But we've had success now with the personal interests, and so some of the students put a lot of different interests down. But we saw fly fishing and camping and backpacking on some of these students. Well, that's Lees-McCrae. We've got a ton of outdoor programs, and so I had a gentleman named Kendall that works for us reaching out, and he's the consummate student affairs guy. outdoor programs guy, and I knew he would be the right guy to reference it. So it would be more like, hey, notice you're interested in fly fishing. Lees-McCrae College has a fly fishing club, and the president is part of that club. So it's like kind of these cool things. Or did you know you could go whitewater rafting in the mountains of North Carolina? I see you put that on there. Hey, I see you're a soccer player. We have NCAA Division II athletics. Just trying to tailor it. We saw someone in gaming. Hey, did you know Lees-McCrae's got several different teams in the esports world? Valorant, Rocket League, League of Legends. As soon as you're addressing something specific that the student said they're interested in, you're now going to become a credible source. So we literally got responses to that. And then we took it to another step. Hey, do you want to apply? Do you want to visit? We've got someone that can talk to. So we've had some interactions just in the past couple of weeks with students that we didn't know, they didn't know us, and we were looking at their profile to say, hey, these you would be good, and based on your self-reported GPA here, you're going to get a scholarship too. So it's kind of like direct admission, but it also takes it up a notch because you can personalize this. And yeah, you got to do some work and you got to do some outreach and things like that. And identifying students through AI is something they've worked on, and that's something that would interest me as well. They can do some of that legwork. So I have a smaller number of people on my staff here than we did at the University of New Haven. If you count my athletics department, I have more. I've got 76 or 77 people, but in admissions at New Haven, we had 54 between grad, international, and undergrad by the time I left. Here it's 20. So, and that's financial aid too. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. But again, we didn't want to waste our time just sending emails to thousands of people. They might not read it. In this, they're in the platform already. And then they've created a profile. Now, they might say, I am not interested. If they put in the profile, I want a school of 10,000, I'm not contacting them. They're going to waste the time. It's like if a student comes up to you at a college fair and says, hey, do you have mechanical engineering? You can't say, oh, no, but you might want wildlife biology. That's not what they're interested in. So this is why I like this, because lots of them put all types of different interests down. And, if you were like speed dating or you were using the dating apps, you want to try to match. This is a way the college does it by reaching, hey, this one might work for us. And the major might not be exactly what they put down, but if they put zoology down, my wildlife biology degree with the field biology specialization is literally zoology with more. And so we get that opportunity to open up a different way to engage the student that's, I guess, more fun and more beneficial to them, as opposed to just getting 250 colleges flying out all these emails. It's just something that I thought I would try, and the initial foray is good.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And I think one of the rooted in all of that is the building of a relationship element, right? And I think one of the areas where things like direct admission fall short a little bit as a standalone program. And don't get me wrong, I love the concept of direct admission in the sense that any ways we can reduce barriers to access to education, let's explore that and see if we can make it work. But the challenge is that we skip the whole step of building a relationship with that student, right? And that when you look at all the studies and all the data and everything, students choose schools because of fit, and they choose it because of that feeling of belonging. And if you just go right to, hey, congrats, you're admitted, you still have to do all of that relationship building and all of that educating and all of that work. So really, it's just an expensive lead, right? At that point. And so so one of the questions in the Q&A, we'll get to that piece, and then we'll start. If you have questions you want to throw in the chat, folks, we'd love to spend some time in answering those. But one of the questions is you mentioned earlier not caring about the number of inquiries you receive. You care about the quality of the inquiries you receive. How do you receive limited quality inquiries that turn into a full class?
You're like, oh, so like, how do you get the volume up? Well,
how do you do the work?
So,
and obviously flipped app is one way, right? Is identifying those students, because you're filtering for the students and you're only getting the applicant ready prospects who are applying and saying, yes, I want to be connected. From a philosophical perspective, what are some of the things that you've done and seen to reduce the volume at the top so that your team doesn't have to chase bad inquiries?
Right. Yeah. I mean, everybody's going to get a lot of inquiries, and that's why you do your search too. You have to do those things, but it's the follow-up that becomes the challenge for people. So it's not like we're just sitting around calling one or two people a day. But I don't want to call 60 a day. So developing that relationship is really critical for us, finding students that are going to come here. Like I said, if someone wants an engineering school, we don't have it. And so it's kind of like we would tell a student, hey, look, if you really want to come to Lees-McCrae, there might be a way to do a combination of business at the undergrad and then get a master's in engineering. And we have some of those, but like that's where you don't want to like just blow them up. Oh, sorry, we don't have it, right? You can always have a conversation with somebody because they might come back to you. They might change their major. Their younger brother might want something. So, we don't just blow people off, but we have to really work hard at it. So we're not just getting one or two, but I looked at it this way. If you got one student from every college fair that we did this year, we would quadruple the size of Lees-McCrae College's school. And so we've grown it steadily because we're small, everybody. I've got 1,000 students. We're completely out of room. We built 2 new resident halls. They're full. So we actually have to be strategic here. We want to move it to 1,500 students by 2030. For anybody that's at a big school, that sounds easy, right? If I brought in a freshman class of 380 students at New Haven, I would have got fired, right? You bring it in here with higher academic quality and a lower discount rate. That's what you have to sell value. The access to education is important, but private schools have to make some money too. So you have to find the right fit. So you have to sell the value. And if I'm a state school, I'm going to sell the value too. And so Appalachian State's right down the road from us. They are functioning like a small private because they want to increase their enrollment. And they have 22,000 students. So there's a lot of things that you can do that are innovative. I think if you just keep doing the same old thing, you'll get the same old results, which is why I decided to use the Flipped app. It's just a different version. I can't spend $100,000 on a direct admission program. North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities has a direct admission program that they're not charging for. So I'm doing that too because I think there are ways to do homegrown ones. I think that we have local partnerships with schools. So I think you have to do more than just follow up with the inquiry. I think you have to develop partnerships with schools, with community colleges. People are going to transfer; they just are, and so you can't get mad when the student doesn't choose your school the first time. You have to say, "Okay, good luck. Let us know if we can help you." It happens all the time. We already have 9 students that were going to come here in the fall, decided they wanted to go somewhere else because they thought we were too small. Now they realized the school they went to was too big. So here they are. So I think at the end of the day, it's not that we're not working hard. We're just not going to call 40 people because they filled out the inquiry card last week. Now they will get an email from us because you never know who's going to come. So you have to do the multi-pronged approach still, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So they're going to get into your communication plan, your comm plan, whatever you're doing. If you do some mailings, I still think mailing works, not too much mailing, but something that's a quality piece, but something that's going to interest the student. I could go on and on, but I think that's what we do.
Quality content to the right person.
Yep.
A direct mail piece is welcomed, right? It's when we throw buckets of mail to people we've never talked to, met, or whatnot. That's when it starts to go down a different path. One of the things I wanted to mention, I know we're close to time, is that you mentioned the Flipped app piece, that the team was working on AI as a method for some of this. The team's working so fast that those are actually now live and in production, right? Where we have the opportunity to kind of take that top of the funnel and let the robots do the work on screening and identifying and making that introduction, and then connecting them to your team. And I believe the data that I was shared was we've already connected a few students to Lees-McCrae that way as well, to members of your team. So I'm excited about the future of all of this because I feel like there are many elements to Flipped app that have been tried over the years, that the technology wasn't quite there, AI wasn't a thing, the volume was hard to come by. And now you've got a platform that's growing week over week with more students who are coming on trying to find schools. And now we've got forward-thinking institutions like Lees-McCrae who are there waiting for them and ready to have those conversations like we had done in the past. I will say to our listening and viewing audience, thank you for the time today. It's been a great to catch up with you again, Kevin. We'll have to do this again sometime. I'll let you have the last word. Any more bits of advice or input for folks who are looking to do better for their teams and also do better for overall student engagement?
Yeah, I can. I could tell you a ton of things. I think there's so much pressure today. Like I told someone the other day, I could go make a free throw with 10,000 people screaming at me as a piece of cake. But if I was playing golf with Gil and I had a 4-foot putt to win $20, I'd probably be nervous. And so you have to be comfortable with what you're doing. And I think that the more experience that you can give people on your teams, don't just use them as robots to be processing applications, to be just doing college fairs for the sake of doing college fairs or buy names for the sake of buying names. I think that the way that it's worked for me, and it worked at Sacred Heart University, it worked at the University of Haven, and it's working at Lees-McCrae. You got to do a lot of different things, but then once you determine that something doesn't work, don't just keep going back. Hey, we did that in 2008. Now we're using virtual. I'm discovering that more students would prefer to be on our campus, but sometimes the way they get to campus is we do a virtual session. We had one a couple weeks ago just because we were closed, and we only had 8 students on there. People that worked with me at New Haven who will remain nameless, we'd probably be all upset. Oh my God, there's only 8 people. Well, out of those 8 people, 7 of them are actually coming to our open house this Saturday. They weren't signed up for it before. So there are different ways. And so that's just one way. And if you take those 7 and we get 5 from the Flipped app and you get 4 from your NCICU direct admission and you get 6 from the college fair, it starts to add up. But then how do you manage the follow-up is really critical. Everyone has a different opinion. We talk to the parents. People, I've heard some schools don't want to do that. Well, guess what? The parent is going to probably make the decision. So you don't have to be having barking dogs in the background for the parents, but maybe for the student you do. But you also have to find a way to communicate with the parent. Don't forget about the school counselor. I think if you are on the vendor side, the one thing I would say, don't be cookie cutter all the time. Don't just do a rehearsed speech. Someone like me, I've been doing this 32 years. I know exactly what you're trying to sell me. Just tell me how much it costs and what you're going to do for me. You don't have to go through your whole slide deck showing what an inquiry is and a prospect. And I think that that's what some people are trained to do. And that's just a piece of advice from someone who makes the decisions. I've turned down, for everyone that I buy, I turn 10 down. And for every 10 that I talk to, I turn 100 more down. I don't have time. Like after this, I have 2 more meetings, and then I got basketball practice at 6 o'clock out of high school because our gym floor got destroyed. So we're doing a whole bunch of things, emergency notifications, preparation, that goes out the window when you get a big disaster. So we're trying to recover from that at the same time. And so I always tell people, and this will be the last thing I say, you got to find out what you're good at and do the very best you can at it. Don't try to be something you're not. You can't, a small school can't be a big school, but you can out recruit a big school if you sell the value of why. Not everybody's going to say yes, just like not everybody's going to respond to the message on Flipped app. And don't get discouraged, because that's what happens. Everyone gets discouraged. Oh, nobody's responding to me. Well, no, 2 people responded to you out of 20. That might make you feel bad. That's why that AI may come in handy. So when someone does reply, developing that relationship. So I hope that made sense. Just, working hard is important. So when we say work smarter, not harder, there's some merit to that, but that doesn't mean you're going to sit here like this and just, all right, nobody's looking at me, I got the door closed. I mean, you're not going to succeed if you don't buy into what you're doing, but you got to enjoy what you're doing. So if you're on the admission side or the marketing side, if you don't enjoy it, do something else. But in my 32nd year, I still enjoy the core function of what we do. Talking to a family. We're providing a service. We're providing an education, which to my knowledge is still extremely important, even though people are questioning the value of education. So you just got to stick with it and maybe find the right team. Maybe you're on the wrong team. I mean, college athletes are in the transfer portal all the time. Professional athletes are, maybe you're just on the wrong team, but you like the job. And that's why it's okay to leave. But don't leave without having that conversation. Gil and I experienced that. I experienced before I met Gil, and I've experienced it after I worked with Gil. So I hope I made sense there, but it was great spending that hour with you all, and hope you got something out of it.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. Kevin, thank you for your time. I know you've got plenty to deal with, particularly in this asterisk of having a hurricane hit your campus. We'll let you get back to that, and we'll let everyone get back to their day. And once again, the recording will be made available to all of our registrants. And we appreciate the time. And Kevin, I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Gil. Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.